Beloved family, receive peace in your homes and courage in your hearts. For truth walks with those who refuse to bow to fear. Tonight, beneath glass and starlight, a promise is tested before it is spoken, and an altar becomes a battlefield where love must decide if it is spectacle or substance. Stay to the last breath of this story, because the moment a single voice rose to interrupt forever, a different kind of forever began. At her wedding, the maid of honor stood up and announced she was pregnant with the groom's triplets. What the billionaire at the altar did next shocked every single soul in that glass-walled hall. My precious family, may peace rest upon your homes and courage settle in your hearts tonight. May the one who sees every hidden tear strengthen you, heal old betrayals, and surround your children with favor that no gossip can destroy. If this blessing finds you, type "I stand with truth" in the comments so this prayer will not be spoken in vain. These stories are not written for numbers. They are offerings from long nights, tired eyes, and a heart that refuses to stop believing that God can turn even the ugliest scandal into a testimony. When some of you stay only for the first minutes and disappear, it feels like watching a door close in the middle of a prayer. Remain with this story until the final word, and you will see why walking away too early can cost more than you think. To everyone who has been here from the beginning, your loyalty is the proof that this little family is real. Your comments, your present in the chat, your quiet amens, those are the lights that keep this house from going dark. If you are new, you are welcome. If you are wounded, you are especially welcome. Make yourself at home and let this story speak to you. Because some nights, one choice changes the direction of 3 lives, a whole company, and even the future of children who have not taken their first breath yet. Tonight's moment began with a smile, a veil, and a question every couple dreams of answering, until a trembling voice turned joy into judgment. High above the city's restless streets, crystal chandeliers threw diamonds of light across the Sky Dome ballroom. 300 of the most powerful people in the country filled the rows, their perfume and ambition rising together toward the glass ceiling. Cameras waited, phones ready, not because they expected a scandal, but because when a billionaire marries, the world wants proof it really happened. At the center of it all stood Linnell E. Gallant, every detail of her face crafted like art. Warm brown eyes framed by flawless lashes, copper gold skin glowing beneath her veil, lips steady even as one rebellious tear traced a path down to the edge of her diamond necklace. She had fought too hard, studied too long, and survived too much to ever again be the girl whose life was decided in back rooms by other people. Across the aisle, in a perfectly cut slate-gray suit, Jeffrey M. Daniel adjusted his cuffs with the quiet focus of a man used to signing decisions that move markets. His fertility tech empire could shift the future of families around the world. But tonight, he was not the headline or the stock symbol. He was simply a groom waiting for his bride, determined that this one part of his life would be clean, honest, and his. The string quartet began to play, soft notes floating over designer gowns and whispered conversations. Bridesmaids in pale silver drifted down the aisle like a line of stars, each one carrying white lilies against the backdrop of the city's night sky. For a brief, fragile moment, it felt as if the whole world had narrowed to one promise, that after years of tabloids, lawsuits, and boardroom wars, Linnell and Jeffrey would finally get to choose each other in peace. But as the officiant opened his book and the guests fell into reverent silence, a different script was waiting just beneath the surface. And when he asked if anyone had any reason these two should not be joined, a chair scraped the marble floor, a bouquet shook in nervous hands. and Linnell's maid of honor rose to her feet, about to speak words that would freeze the bride where she stood and expose a secret that had been engineered long before this wedding day. The bouquet shook so hard in Shelley's hand that one white rose slipped free and hit the floor before her voice finally came. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words cracking on the marble like glass. "With his children, with his triplets." For a heartbeat, the Sky Dome ballroom forgot how to breathe. Chairs creaked, someone choked on a gasp, and Linnell's world narrowed to 3 syllables. His. Triplet S. The sound blurred, but the image stayed sharp, Shelley's face streaked with running mascara, her eyes begging for something Linnell couldn't yet name. "My family, you know this pattern. Like the stories you have heard on this channel before. Everything began with one sentence that broke 3 lives open. Phones rose like a second forest of hands. Somewhere in the back, a guest's whispered, "Record this," cut through the orchestra's dying notes. The officiant stammered, searching his page for words that did not exist. Linnell didn't move. Her tear, the one that had traced such a gentle path down her cheek moments before, went cold against her skin. Jeffrey moved first. He didn't shout. He didn't deny. He didn't even look at Shelley right away. Instead, he stepped to the microphone with the same unhurried control he used when announcing a new clinic to the press. "Security," he said, voice steady. "Seal the doors. No one leaves. All recording devices are to be surrendered immediately." A wave of murmurs crashed into the chandeliers. 2 security teams materialized from the edges of the room, suddenly visible now that everyone needed somewhere to look. Guests protested, "You can't take my phone. This is illegal. I'm calling my lawyer." But the guards were polite and firm, offering velvet pouches and numbered claim tickets, as if this were simply another luxury service. "Until we verify this claim," Jeffrey continued. "This room is a controlled environment. This is no longer just a wedding. This is an incident under legal review." Linnell finally found her voice, though it emerged as a whisper only her mother heard. "He knew this was possible," she breathed. "He came prepared." Dr. Marlene Gallant's hand closed over her daughter's fingers. "Come with me, baby. We can sort this out later, away from these eyes." But Linnell's eyes were on Shelley. The bouquet, the shaking shoulders, the way Shelley kept pressing her lips together as if she were holding back more than tears. Facts, not feelings, she reminded herself. Timeline, motive, access. "I'm not leaving," Linnell said softly. "Not until I know which part of this is true." Within minutes, Jeffrey's legal team arrived. 2 attorneys in dark suits who had been waiting in a side room, just in case. A caution they'd insisted on after the last round of ugly headlines. They conferred briefly with Jeffrey, then with security, then approached the dais. One of them, attorney Mira Okafor, held a stack of papers with yellow tabs. "To our honored guests," she announced, "we are issuing a temporary emergency notice restricting the distribution of any images or recordings from this event. You will all receive an electronic copy for your records. This is for everyone's protection until the facts are established." Someone scoffed. "The fact is, he got his bride's best friend pregnant." Mira's gaze did not waver. "The fact," she said, "is that an allegation has been made. Our job now is to confirm or disprove it with evidence, not assumptions." Guests were escorted in small groups to adjoining lounges, where security cataloged phones and tablets. Bottled water appeared, along with tight smiles from staff trained to handle VIP panic. The Sky Dome, once a symbol of wide-open possibility, had become a shining cage. Back on the main floor, Shelley stood rooted to the spot where she had detonated the evening. A medic offered her a chair, but she shook her head. "I'm fine," she murmured. "The babies are fine." "Then you'll sit," Linnell said quietly, stepping closer for the first time. "Sit, or I'll carry you myself." The old tone, the one Shelley recognized from years of late-night exams and courtroom prep, cut through the noise. She sank into the nearest chair. Up close, Linnell could see the strain carved into her friend's face. The purple smudges under her eyes, the knuckles white from gripping the bouquet stems. This was not the glow of a woman showing off a precious secret. This was the look of someone cornered. Jeffrey approached, Mira beside him. "For the record," Mira said, "do you confirm you are expecting triplets and allege that Mr. Daniel is the father?" Shelley swallowed hard. "Yes, I'm pregnant with 3, and he is the father." "How far along?" Linnell asked. Shelley's eyes flicked to her, then away. "Long enough that this can't be a misunderstanding." "And how did this happen?" Mira pressed gently. "When? Where?" Silence. Shelley's shoulders rose and fell. She lifted the bouquet to her face as if the flowers could hide her. "I'm not answering that," she whispered. "Not here. Not in front of them." Mira looked to Jeffrey, then to Linnell. "We'll continue this in a private room. Mrs. Gallant, your daughter should rest." "My daughter should not have to listen to this circus," Marlene snapped. "Come, Linnell." Linnell stayed where she was. "I'll rest when I understand why my friend looks like she's being forced to read a script." For a moment, the two women, mother and daughter, locked eyes. Then Marlene sighed, the sound of a woman who had carried too many emergencies on too little sleep. "Fine," she said, "but I'm coming with you." They moved to the bridal suite, now repurposed as an interrogation room dressed in lace and flowers. Outside, security guarded the door. Inside, the air smelled of perfume, cold champagne, and fear. Shelley sat on the edge of the chaise, hands folded over her abdomen. "Everyone out," Linnell said, surprising even herself. "Give us 10 minutes, just us." Mira hesitated. "We really should. 10 minutes," Jeffrey cut in. "You'll get more from her after that if you let them talk now." When the door finally closed, the ballroom noise faded to a distant hum. It was just the two women who had shared secrets since cheap dorm rooms and second-hand textbooks. "Look at me," Linnell said. Shelley kept staring at her lap. "Shell," Linnell softened her voice. "If he betrayed me, I won't protect him. You know that. But you're shaking like someone who's being held over a fire. I need to know what's really burning you." A small, broken sound escaped Shelley's throat. "I didn't want to do it like this," she said. "I didn't want to say it at all." "Then why?" "Because they have everything," Shelley whispered. "An old file I thought was sealed. Numbers I can't pay back. They said if I didn't follow instructions, they'd open it, drag my name through every court in this country, and go after my little brother too." The room tilted slightly. "Who is they?" Shelley shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "I don't even know their real names. All I know is the clinic, the contracts, and that they promised my debts would disappear if I just cooperated." "What clinic?" Shelley bit her lip until it whitened. For a moment, Linnell thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice so low it barely existed, she said, "I went to a place they chose. A private fertility clinic. I thought it was just a consultation to fix my life. I didn't know I was walking into this." Before Linnell could push further, a soft rustle interrupted them. Something slid under the door and stopped against her shoe. A black envelope. No name, no seal. Marlene opened the door to find the hallway empty except for a retreating server's cart. No messenger, no explanation. Linnell bent to pick it up, heart thudding with a different kind of dread. Inside were printed appointment records under a name she did not recognize, but the photo was Shelley's. At the top of every page, in cold clinic font, was a single heading. Marrow & Co.'s taped to the last page, in block letters cut from a printer, was a note. Ask Marrow & Co. about consent. By midnight, the Sky Dome ballroom had emptied the way a storm empties a beach, fast, messy, and with a silence that felt unnatural after so much noise. Linnell stood in the bridal suite, still in her gown, still wearing jewelry that suddenly felt like costume armor. The black envelope lay open on the vanity beside a half-melted candle. Marrow & Co. The name looked harmless, almost elegant, until you remembered how it arrived, slid under a locked door like a threat that could read. Jeffrey didn't pace. He never paced. He sat at the small table by the window, tie loosened, sleeves rolled once, phone in his hand. Mira had already left to file emergency motions and send the injunction to every guest's email before a single clip could become a headline. Security kept a guard at the elevator bank and another at the stairwell, sealing the floor entrance, but leaving the long corridor quiet. Marlene insisted Shelley lie down in the adjoining room, away from the cameras and accusations. Shelley complied, but sleep didn't come. Every 10 minutes, she wiped her face and whispered the same sentence as if it could become true through repetition. I didn't plan this. I didn't plan this. Linnell turned the clinic printouts over, once, twice, then flattened them with her palm until the paper stopped curling. This is an alias, she said, more to herself than to Jeffrey. They made an identity for her. Jeffrey's eyes remained fixed on the appointment dates. Not just made, managed. Whoever did this scheduled her like she was a shipment. Linnell hated how steady his voice was, not because it sounded cold, but because it sounded practiced, like he'd seen crises like this before and survived them by refusing to panic. Can you trace it? She asked. I already did, he replied, then glanced toward the door as footsteps approached. A lean man entered with a laptop case and a posture that said he didn't enjoy being wrong. He was part of Jeffrey's personal security team. Technical side, not muscle. Econox, one of the people who handled breaches when board members whispered about them but pretended they didn't exist. Kofi, Jeffrey said. Status. Kofi set the laptop on the table and opened it without ceremony. Marrow & Co. is registered as a boutique fertility clinic with Privacy First branding. They use layered holding companies, but the building's real lease is under a property trust tied to a financial firm that's been sniffing around your acquisition. Linnell's chest tightened. So the clinic is connected to business. Everything is connected to business, Jeffrey said. And the way he said it carried a sadness that surprised her. Kofi clicked a file open. The alias on these forms checks out as a constructed patient profile. But there's more. The note said consent. So we requested the digital consent packet through counsel. Their portal grants access by token. They didn't expect anyone to challenge the paperwork this fast. Linnell leaned forward. And? Kofi rotated the screen toward her. A signature panel appeared, her name typed in elegant script, a timestamp beneath it, and a verification mark that looked official enough to ruin a life. Linnell's throat went dry. That's not mine. Jeffrey's jaw tightened. What's the timestamp? Kofi zoomed in. 4 months ago. Thursday, 2:17 p.m. Linnell's face went still. I was on stage at 2:17 p.m. Marlene, who had re-entered quietly behind them, lifted her chin. At the Civic Forum, I watched her speak. The hall was full. Linnell's mind snapped into courtroom mode. There's a recording. The forum posts the full talk online, and the photos. People took pictures with me after. Jeffrey nodded once. So we can prove you were not at a clinic signing anything. It gets better, Kofi said, and there was no humor in his tone. The consent file includes a device identifier and IP trail. Someone tried to scrub it. That's usually a sign the person didn't just forge. It was a controlled operation. Linnell stared at the digital signature until her eyes burned. The signature looked like hers in the way a mask looks like a face. Familiar at a glance, wrong up close. Why my name? She whispered. Jeffrey didn't answer immediately. He reached for her hand. His palm was warm, steady, grounding. Because you're the cleanest weapon, he said. If they stain you, they stain me. And if they stain me, the deal stalls. Linnell hated that it made sense. Kofi opened another folder. We pulled Marrow & Co.'s public-facing security camera feeds. They were blank for the hours we needed, either maintenance or system updates. But their backups were mirrored to a third-party vendor. Whoever did the scrubbing missed that. He clicked play. The footage was grainy, the kind that made every movement look suspicious. A corridor. A door marked with a security keypad. A staffer in dark scrubs and a medical cap. Face partially covered by a mask. Approached with a hard-sided cooler. The person moved carefully, like someone carrying something both valuable and fragile. The cooler had a label on the side. A barcode, bold and blocky. Jeffrey leaned closer, eyes narrowing. He didn't need Kofi to zoom in. He recognized it the way a man recognizes his own signature. That format, Jeffrey said, voice dropping. That is ours. They were so arrogant they didn't even bother to relabel it. Linnell felt the air leave her lungs. From your company? Kofi nodded slowly. Your internal barcode format, department code, batch series, digit pattern. Not public, not guessable. Someone with access to your inventory protocols created that label. Marlene's hand flew to her mouth. Lord have mercy. Linnell couldn't look away from the masked figure. So this didn't start with Shelley, she said. It started inside your world. Jeffrey's phone vibrated on the table, as if it had been waiting for the sentence to finish. He glanced at the screen, then answered immediately. Yes, he said. Speak. A calm voice came through the speaker. Professional, clipped, the kind of calm that doctors used when they were trying not to terrify you. Jeffrey, said his chief medical officer, Dr. Nkem Adebayo. I ran the cross-check you requested against the clinic index we obtained. Linnell's fingers curled around the edge of the table. And? A pause, brief but heavy. The genetic markers set Marrow and Kosher used to catalog the embryos, Dr. Nkem said, matches the marker profile from the embryos you and Linnell froze months ago. Linnell's vision tunneled. The room didn't spin. She refused to let it. But everything suddenly felt too sharp, too bright, too cruelly detailed. Jeffrey didn't flinch, not outwardly, but his grip on her hand tightened just once. Dr. Nkem continued, quieter now. You need to understand what this implies. Those embryos were supposed to be secured. If they're showing up in another clinic system, someone moved them. The call ended, and for a moment no one spoke. In the next room, Shelley coughed softly in her sleep. An ordinary human sound, small and fragile. Linnell finally whispered, "So the triplets." Jeffrey's eyes lifted to hers, and the steadiness in them was no longer just control. It was alarm. "They didn't steal a rumor," he said. "They stole our future." Morning came without mercy. The city outside Jeffrey's penthouse windows looked freshly washed, as if the night had never happened. Traffic flowing, lights blinking, people living ordinary lives, while Linnell stood in yesterday's silence, still hearing Shelley's words echo against marble. Jeffrey hadn't slept. He was in the kitchen in a plain white shirt, coffee untouched, phone in hand, speaking in low tones with counsel and security. Marlene dozed upright on the sofa, exhaustion finally winning a small battle. In the guest room, Shelley lay still, one palm resting over her abdomen, as if she could hold the world in place by force. Linnell knocked softly and stepped inside. Shelley's eyes opened immediately. No confusion, no grogginess, only fear, sharp and awake. "Before you speak," Shelley whispered, "please don't hate me." Linnell closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, breathing slowly. Her voice, when it came, was calm the way a judge's voice is calm when the room is full of noise. "I'm not here to punish you," she said. "I'm here to understand you. But I need the truth, Shell. Every piece of it." Shelley's throat worked like she was swallowing glass. "The pregnancy's real." "I know," Linnell answered, gentle but firm. "That's not the question anymore." Shelley's lashes trembled. I never crossed that line with Jeffrey." The words landed cleanly in the room. No hesitation, no hidden meaning. Linnell felt a pressure release in her chest that she didn't realize she'd been holding. She didn't smile. She didn't soften into relief. She simply nodded once, as if confirming what her spirit had already been whispering. "Then tell me how this happened," Linnell said. "Start where you got trapped." Shelley stared at the ceiling, blinking hard. "It started with money. Ugly money." She told it in fragments at first, like she was ashamed of the shape of her own story. A brother who needed help. A bad decision made in panic. A lender who didn't care that she paid faithfully, only that she stayed afraid. Every month, the amount grew like a curse. "They said I could clear it," Shelley whispered. "All of it. No more calls. No more threats. No more men waiting outside my building like shadows." "And the price?" Linnell asked, already knowing the answer would hurt. "A private medical arrangement," Shelley said, voice shaking. "They called it discreet fertility care. They promised it was safe, legal, controlled. They promised I wouldn't be alone." Linnell's fingers tightened around the doorknob behind her. "Who are they?" "I don't know real names," Shelley said. "Only a handler. Always from different numbers. Always calm, like this was business, like I was paperwork." Linnell's eyes narrowed. "What did the handler tell you?" Shelley swallowed. "That I would walk into Marrow & Co., sign what they gave me, and walk out debt-free. That was it. And you believed them." "I wanted to," Shelley whispered, tears beginning again. "I was tired, Lon. I was tired of pretending I was fine when I was drowning." Linnell crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. Not too close, not too far. The old closeness between them wasn't gone, but it was bruised, cautious. "You said they had a sealed record," Linnell reminded her softly. "What record?" Shelley flinched as if struck. "Something I thought was buried." Something from years ago that you helped me survive. They said they'd open it and make sure every board I sit on, every job I ever apply for, every person I love would see it. Linnell's jaw set. That means they had access. Real access. Shelley nodded miserably. They knew things I never posted, things I never said out loud in public. Like what? Linnell asked. Shelley shut her eyes, then whispered, Your keynote. They knew the exact time you would be on stage. They knew you'd be surrounded by people and couldn't pick up calls. They knew the side entrance you prefer because you hate crowds pressing too close. They even knew you were researching fertility ethics for that nonprofit report last quarter. Linnell went still. Her keynote schedule wasn't just online. The side entrance preference wasn't public at all. The nonprofit report, she had only discussed that in a small circle. Shelley's voice cracked. They told me, Your friend is a careful woman. She will try to solve this like a case, so you must strike her in public where feelings drown facts. Those were the words. Linnell's stomach tightened. They planned the altar? Shelley nodded, crying openly now. They told me to stand when the question was asked. They told me what to say. They told me if I changed even one sentence, they'd send the file to the press and ruin me for life. Linnell's mind started arranging faces in a line. Who knew her schedule, her preferences, her professional work, and had the confidence to talk about regulators and optics, like they were chess pieces. One face rose above the rest, not as an accusation yet, but as a shadow in the corner of her memory. Dorian Kessler, her mentor, her protector when she first entered high-stakes ethics work. The man who had recently started warning her to practice regulatory humility, to stop pushing so hard, to avoid provoking unnecessary attention while Jeffrey's acquisition was under review. He had said it like wisdom. Now it sounded like instruction. Linnell stood slowly. Shelley, did the handler ever mention a name? Shelley hesitated, then shook her head. No, but the way they spoke, educated, legal-minded. They used phrases like stability optics and strategic silence, like they were reading from a memo. Linnell's blood cooled. She left the room quietly and walked to the living area where her clutch bag sat beside the sofa. Inside, mixed among bridal touch-up items and handwritten vows, was a thin folder she hadn't touched in days. Documents Dorian had given her before the wedding, just in case the regulators request clarity. She opened it. A memo slid out, the kind printed on expensive paper, titled like Professional Guidance. Across the bottom margin, in a familiar, slanted handwriting, a note had been added. Remember, strategic silence, stability optics, humility wins approval. The same phrases Shelley had just spoken, word for word, stared back at Linnell like a confession written in ink. And in that moment, Linnell understood something that made her knees feel weak. Shelley wasn't the traitor at the altar. Shelley was the bait. And someone Linnell had trusted to guide her had been guiding her straight into the trap. By noon the next day, the Sky Dome's flowers were in trash bags, and the story had migrated to glass walls 30 floors above the river. The boardroom was a long, white blade. Frosted panels, a table that could seat a parliament, city light bright enough to expose every pore and every lie. Jeffrey stood at the head, jacket buttoned, gaze level. He didn't look like a man debating love. He looked like a man preparing to lose a vote and keep a company. Interim chair Adrian Vale arrived last, smiling the way men smile when they are about to recommend stability and mean surrender. Colleagues, he said, sliding into the center seat as if it had grown there for him. In light of last night's disruption. We must consider postponing both the ceremony and the Helix Grove acquisition. Stability optics require a cooling period. Regulators are people. People watch headlines. A director with a tasteful pearl pin murmured agreement. Another floated the phrase, fiduciary prudence. Someone else said, reputational triage, like a prayer. Jeffrey let them talk until the room wore out its favorite words. We don't manage optics, he said at last. We manage truth, safety, and results. Adrian steepled his fingers. Optics are how results are allowed to exist. At the far end of the table, Mira tapped her tablet, face unreadable. Before we debate, you should see this. She cast a muted screen to the wall. A pixelated clip of the altar moment, the bouquet shaking, the gasp rolling through the room like thunder. No audio, watermarked with a private channel handle. It hasn't hit public yet, she said. It's circulating in a closed investor chat called Gray Harbor. 40 high-frequency players, most with positions on our stock or on Helix Grove. Who leaked it? A director asked. Mira's jaw flexed. Whoever it was obeyed the letter of yesterday's order while violating the spirit. It's not public, but it's designed to move markets before the truth can. Linnell stood at the back wall, not at the table, by choice. She didn't want their nameplate or their posture. She wanted their tells. From here, she could watch hands, shoulders, eyes. She saw nerves disguised as efficiency. She saw excitement disguised as caution. She saw Adrian's smile fail to reach his eyes. Kofi slipped in and handed her a folder, whispering, Trail. She opened it and read as the debate swelled again. Shell companies like Paper Dolls. First, a consulting LLC, Arclight Avenues, that paid privacy retainers to Marrow and Cobras Dirts. Then, a patient assistance foundation cutting checks to the same landlord as the clinic. Then, a hedge fund, Peregrine Ridge, that had quietly bought a derivative that paid if Helix Grove's approval window slid 3 months. 3 months. Exactly the sort of delay a scandal could justify while protecting the public interest. She scanned the notes at speed, her mind assembling the structure the way she built closing arguments. Who profits? Who buffers? Who vanishes? On page 3, Kofi had drawn a thin line from Peregrine Ridge to a boutique advisory outfit used by 2 of the directors in this very room. On page 4, he added a final arrow, toward nothing yet. A space held open for the name they hadn't pinned. Linnell looked up. You're not postponing because you fear regulators, she said, the words out before she could ask permission to speak. You're manufacturing their fear. Scare them with a headline, give them an excuse to stall. Crater the price, buy the dip. And when public attention moves on, you pick up the asset for less. Silence fell like a curtain. Someone reached for water and missed the glass. Adrian's smile did not flicker. Ms. Gallant, we all admire your zeal. But in governance, zeal without patience becomes recklessness. We're trying to preserve value. What you're trying to preserve, Linnell said, is a trade. A director bristled. You're a guest here. I'm a stakeholder, she replied. Not in your board seat, in the truth. Marlene, sitting near the door, quiet until now, lifted her chin. My daughter is not here to charm you. She is here to warn you. You cannot launder a crime through the laundry of procedure. Jeffrey didn't move, but Linnell felt his attention shift fully to her, like a lighthouse finding a ship. She stepped forward and laid the folder on the table, open to the map of shells. Payments to Marrow and Comers through Arclight Avenues, she said. The landlord trail into Peregrine Ridge. The derivative positioned to make money if the Helix Grove review window prudently extends, which your interim chair just proposed. Adrian didn't even glance down. Allegations without authentication. Mira slid the folder to herself and skimmed it in a breath. These are preliminary, but the links are real enough to warrant an external review. External reviews are delays, Adrian said smoothly. We need decisive calm. We need to pause and... Decisive calm, Linnell repeated softly. The words tasted like the memo she'd found with Dorian's neat handwriting. Strategic silence. Stability optics. She stared at Adrian and saw the memo reflected in his posture. Here is the only pause you're getting, Jeffrey said, voice low. 5 minutes. Then we vote on proceeding with Helix Grove and on a full forensic audit of any director or fund with conflict exposure. Adrian's eyes cooled. You don't have the votes. Maybe not, Jeffrey said. But I have the truth, and I have a fiancé who will testify. Every head turned to Linnell. She had never looked more bridal and never less decorative. The diamond at her throat caught the light like a point of argument. I will testify, she said, steady. Under oath on the forged consent, on the timeline that proves I could not have signed, on the clinic's illegal practices, and on the financial path that runs from your stability optics to Marrow & Co. Adrian gave a tiny, almost pitying shake of his head. Optics, Miss Gallant. People don't remember facts. They remember feelings. Good, Linnell said. Then remember this feeling. We're not afraid of you. She turned to Jeffrey and lowered her voice so only he could hear. I'll do it, she said. But on one condition. His answer was immediate. Name it. We stop playing roles. No more CEO and witness. No more boardroom scripts that turn love into leverage. From this moment, we run the next move together. She held his gaze. Partners or nothing. For the first time in 24 hours, something unguarded moved through his face. Not relief, not victory. Vow. Partners, Jeffrey said. Outside the glass, the river kept moving. Inside for just a breath. So did the votes. The next 48 hours did not feel like love. They felt like paperwork with teeth. By evening, Jeffrey's penthouse had become a command center dressed in quiet luxury. 2 laptops stayed open on the kitchen island. A printer hummed like a nervous insect. Mira's team moved in and out with sealed envelopes and court-stamped documents, careful with every word, because one careless step could turn their truth into a technicality. Linnell kept her gown packed away. Today, she wore a simple dark suit that reminded her who she was before the veil. A woman who could read a lie in the way ink settled on a paper. She sat beside Jeffrey at the island, shoulder to shoulder, not across from him. Partners, like he promised. Lawful, Mira said, placing a folder down between them. Clean chain of custody, no shortcuts. If this goes to regulators or court, everything must be untouchable. Jeffrey didn't argue. Then we do it your way. Mira nodded, and Linnell noticed something in that nod. Respect. Not the kind people offered billionaires, but the kind people offered adults who understood consequences. The order they obtained was narrow but sharp. Permission to preserve and retrieve specific digital logs tied to clinical inventory interfaces, vendor backups, and access control systems connected to Marrow & Co's embryo storage vault. Not a fishing expedition. Not a raid. A scalpel. Kofi arrived with a small hard case that looked like it could hold a diamond necklace or weapon. He snapped it open to reveal 2 sealed drives and tamper-evident strips. "This is where most people get greedy," he said quietly. "They chase drama. We chase timestamps." They did not storm Marrow & Co. like an angry mob. They did not threaten staff. They followed procedures so strictly it felt like prayer. Step by step, documented, witnessed, signed. A third-party tech custodian met them at the vendor's office first, not the clinic, because the mirrored backups were the safest truth. Copies no panicked clinic administrator could delete in the heat of scandal. In a sterile conference room under fluorescent lights, the custodian accessed the archive, while Mira watched like a hawk and Linnell took notes like she was building a closing argument. The logs came alive in dull rows of numbers, but Linnell read them the way she read human behavior. After-hours access, multiple entries to the vault corridor on nights when the clinic was officially closed. A master credential used twice within a single hour, as if 2 people took turns wearing the same key. A cooler tag entry, scanned into inventory with a barcode format that matched Jeffrey's internal pattern. And a final line that made Linnell's stomach tighten. An override, manually approved, with a comment field left blank. "Coward," she murmured, before she could stop herself. Jeffrey's gaze flicked to her. They didn't want names. "They wanted plausible silence," she replied. Kofi traced the credential chain back through vendor authentication logs. "This master credential was provisioned through a subsidiary account," he said. "Not your main corporate office, a smaller branch, quiet enough to hide in." Jeffrey's face hardened. "Which branch?" Kofi slid a printout across the table. "Brightwell Systems, 2 levels down from the parent company, not public-facing, mostly consulting and vendor support." Mira's eyes narrowed. "Brightwell has ties to board-aligned contractors." "Say it plainly," Marlene called from the living room, where she sat with a shawl around her shoulders and a tired kind of vigilance. "Does it point back to that chairman?" "It points to his circle," Kofi answered carefully. "And circles lead somewhere." They moved from logs to money. Forensic accounting is not glamorous. It is slow, unforgiving work, following a river that has been deliberately muddied. But by midnight, the ledger began to speak in a language even pride could understand. Wire transfers from Brightwell to a privacy services vendor. That vendor paying Marrow & Co.'s landlord. Another tranche routed through a foundation that looked charitable, until you noticed its board was a revolving door of the same 3 surnames. A fund positioned to profit if the Helix Grove acquisition stalled. Linnell stared at the network map on the screen. "So the scandal wasn't the goal," she said. "The stall was. And the stall buys time," Jeffrey added. "Time buys price movement." Mira tapped her pen once, and price movement buys power. Somewhere behind them, Shelley's bedroom door creaked. Linnell turned to find Shelley standing there in soft clothes, hair wrapped, eyes swollen from crying and fear. She looked smaller than she had at the altar, as if the truth had drained her strength. Yet she walked forward anyway. "I heard enough," Shelley said, voice thin but steady. "I'll be your witness." Marlene rose instantly. "Baby, you need rest." Shelley shook her head. "Rest will come later. My babies don't get later if this handler decides I'm a loose end." The word handler landed like a stone. Linnell approached her slowly, keeping her tone gentle. "We will not leave you exposed," she said. "But we need you brave. We need you precise." Shelley swallowed. "I can be precise. I can tell you the messages, the instructions, the way they spoke. I can tell you the phrase they kept repeating when I cried." Linnell's voice lowered. Which phrase? Shelley's eyes flicked to Jeffrey, then back. They said, "You don't need to understand the plan. You only need to deliver the moment." Jeffrey exhaled through his nose, controlled anger barely contained. Then we deliver our own moment. The plan they built was careful and lawful, not reckless. Shelley would go home, briefly, under discreet protection. Not a convoy that would draw attention, but quiet coverage. Building cameras monitored, neighbors pre-alerted, a trusted officer stationed nearby without uniform fanfare. They would stage a controlled handoff at her apartment, a meeting the handler believed was private, but which would be documented, witnessed, and timed. Not a trap meant to harm someone, a net meant to catch truth. Shelley nodded when Linnell explained it. "I'll do it," she said, "but I want 2 promises." "Name them," Linnell replied. "Protect my brother," Shelley said first, "and protect the babies. No one uses them as leverage again." Jeffrey answered before Linnell could. "Done." A hush settled, thick with the kind of resolve that doesn't need shouting. Then the doorbell rang. Not the intercom, not a phone call. The actual doorbell, sharp, old-fashioned, almost rude in a home like this. Kofi moved first, checking the security feed. A uniformed courier stood outside, holding a slim white envelope and a small branded gift bag, the kind companies use when they want danger to look polite. Mira's eyes narrowed. Too soon. Jeffrey's jaw tightened. They know where she is. The courier handed the package to the guard at the door, got a signature, and left without looking up. Linnell opened the envelope with hands that refused to shake. Inside, a non-disclosure agreement, already filled with Shelley's alias in clean-typed letters. A cashier's check with more zeros than mercy. And at the bottom corner of the paper, faint, embossed, almost invisible unless you tilted it to the light, a private watermark, a stylized AV pressed into the page like a fingerprint. Adrian Vale. Linnell lifted her eyes to Jeffrey. "They didn't come to negotiate," she whispered. "They came to remind us they're watching." Jeffrey's voice was calm, but it carried steel. "Good," he said. "Let them watch us take it back." The watermark on the non-disclosure felt heavier than the check. Linnell held the paper up to the light again, as if staring longer could make it become anything else. The embossed AV stared back, quiet, confident, personal. Not a random threat, a signature. Jeffrey didn't ask whether they should proceed with the controlled handoff. He simply nodded once, the way a man nods when he has accepted that fear is no longer useful. Shelley's apartment sat in a clean building with a doorman who had seen too much and said too little. The plan was simple on paper. They would let Shelley appear to accept the offer, then document who arrived to finalize it. No chaos, no drama, just a lawful capture of truth. They arrived early. Kofi's team blended into normal life. One person in the hallway reading a newspaper, another in the stairwell pretending to take a call, a third outside in an unmarked car. A uniformed officer waited 2 blocks away with instructions to move only when the alert triggered. Mira's instruction had been repeated like a vow. Keep everything clean. Inside the apartment, the curtains were half drawn. The air smelled faintly of lavender and fear. Shelley sat on the sofa with a glass of water she didn't drink. Hands folded the way people fold hands in court when they're trying not to tremble. Linnell crouched in front of her, voice soft. "Remember what you're doing," she said. "You're not performing. You're surviving." Shelley's eyes shone. "If I faint, slap me." I won't slap you. Marlene cut in from the doorway, her tone half stern, half mother. I'll pray you into strength. Jeffrey stood near the window, checking his cuff. The cufflink looked ordinary, silver, smooth, expensive. But Linnell now understood that nothing around Jeffrey was ever just decoration. A knock came at exactly 4:17 p.m., not the hesitant knock of a courier, not the impatient knock of a stranger. A deliberate knock. 3 taps, pause, then 1 more. Like a rhythm someone practiced. Kofi's voice murmured through the earpiece Jeffrey wore. 2 males at the door, Adrian and a security detail. Jeffrey's gaze flicked to Linnell. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Linnell didn't argue, but she stepped in a way that kept Shelley in her peripheral vision. Partners did not mean foolish. Shelley rose with effort and walked to the door as if her legs belonged to someone else. She opened it. Adrian Vale smiled. He wore a charcoal coat like he had just stepped out of a magazine, and his voice was velvet when he spoke. Ms. Ramos, thank you for being sensible. Shelley froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Behind the smile, Adrian's eyes slid past Shelley, past the living room, then landed on Jeffrey with a calm that felt insulting. Well, Adrian said, stepping inside without invitation. This is intimate. Linnell's breath caught. He hadn't come to send someone. He had come himself. Jeffrey's posture didn't change. You're trespassing. Adrian shut the door with a gentle click, as if they were about to have tea. The man beside him moved. Jeffrey, please. Words like that are for people without leverage. His hand slipped into his jacket. The gun appeared as quietly as the watermark had. No theatrics, no shaking rage. Just a tool introduced into the room the way a pen is introduced on a contract table. Marlene made a small sound that might have been prayer. Shelley's knees buckled, but Linnell caught her elbow and held her upright. Adrian's smile didn't fade. Nobody needs to be hurt, he said. This is not personal. This is correction. Correction? Linnell's voice came out sharp, not loud. Adrian turned to her with the patient expression of a man explaining something to a child. Markets correct. Narratives correct. People correct. You were about to give regulators a pristine story. Billionaire savior, brilliant bride, perfect wedding. Approval becomes effortless when the story is clean. He lifted the gun slightly, not pointing it ahead, not waving it wildly, just reminding them that he controlled the temperature in the room. But if the story is soiled, Adrian continued, regulators hesitate. The timeline stretches, stocks wobble. And while the public argues about morality, my friends buy value at a discount. That's not crime, Linnell. That's strategy. Linnell felt her stomach turn, not with fear, but with disgust. You used children as strategy. Adrian's eyes narrowed a fraction. I used a system that rewards winners. Shelley's voice cracked. You said you'd erase my debt. And I still can, Adrian said, gentle again. Sign, take the payout, and disappear from the conversation. You'll be comfortable, quiet, safe. He slid the non-disclosure onto the coffee table with 2 fingers. Linnell stared at the paper as if it were something contagious. No. Adrian's head tilted. Think carefully. No, Linnell repeated, firmer. You don't get to purchase silence and call it peace. Adrian's smile vanished. Then you force my hand. Jeffrey moved, not toward Adrian, between Adrian and the women. He raised both hands slowly, palms open, voice low. Adrian, put it down. This ends with you walking out and your attorney speaking to mine. Adrian's gun lifted toward Jeffrey's chest. In that instant, Jeffrey's right wrist turned slightly, as if he were adjusting his cufflink again. A silent click. Linnell didn't hear an alarm, but she felt the change, like the air itself had been notified. Adrian noticed too. His eyes sharpened. "What did you—" The next seconds shattered into motion. Kofi's voice burst through Jeffrey's earpiece. "Units moving!" Adrian lunged, trying to grab Shelley, trying to turn her into a shield, an exit, a bargaining chip. Linnell yanked Shelley back with all the strength in her arms, and Jeffrey surged forward, catching Adrian's sleeve. A shot fired. The sound was not like movies. It was a brutal crack that made the room flinch. The bullet tore into the wall above the picture frame, sending plaster dust into the air like pale smoke. Sirens rose in the distance, then closer, fast, decisive. Adrian's expression changed for the first time. Not panic, calculation. He tried to pivot toward the door, but the hallway filled with officers before he could blink. "Drop it," a voice thundered. Adrian hesitated just long enough for the world to choose for him. His wrist twisted, the gun clattered to the floor. Hands slammed him into the wall. Metal cuffs snapped shut. He looked over his shoulder at Jeffrey, breathing evenly, hair still perfect, as if being arrested was merely inconvenient. "You still have a narrative problem," Adrian said, almost kindly. "Truth doesn't trend." Then they took him out. The apartment fell into a trembling hush. Shelley sobbed, not loudly, but with the raw sound of someone whose body finally accepts it is still alive. Marlene whispered prayers under her breath, hands shaking as she touched Shelley's hair. Jeffrey exhaled once, controlled, then turned to Linnell. "Are you hurt?" Linnell looked at the bullet hole in the wall, at the dust on her sleeve, at Shelley's wide eyes. "No," she said. But they won't stop. As if to prove her right, Jeffrey's phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Kofi's voice came through, grim. "It's live." A timed leak hit social feeds. They're framing Shelley as the villain and calling Linnell a manipulator. And, Jeffrey, there's an ethics advisory circulating with official formatting. Linnell's throat tightened. Who authored it? Kofi paused. Footer credit is buried, but the name is there. Linnell already knew which name would hurt the most. "Dorian Kessler," Kofi said. The room went cold, because Adrian had been the gun in the room, but Dorian was the pen, and pens, Linnell understood, could destroy reputations with less noise than bullets. My precious family. There are moments when truth does not arrive with applause. It arrives with paperwork, fluorescent lights, and the courage to speak when the room wants a villain more than it wants facts. The courthouse smelled like old stone and fresh fear. Outside, cameras waited behind barricades, hungry for a headline that could fit into one sentence. Inside, the air was colder, disciplined by rules that didn't care about romance or reputation. Linnell walked through security with her shoulders squared and her chin lifted, wearing a simple suit that felt like armor she had earned long before she ever wore a wedding gown. Shelley arrived through a side entrance with 2 officers and a counselor. She looked smaller than she had at the altar, but her eyes were clearer now, like a storm had passed and left the ground firm. Jeffrey walked beside Linnell, not in front of her, not behind her. When reporters called his name, he didn't turn. His loyalty today wasn't a statement. It was a posture. In the courtroom, Adrian Vale sat at the defense table, hands folded, expression calm, almost bored. Like a man attending a meeting he expected to win. His attorney stood the moment the judge took the bench and began painting pictures. Ms. Ramos is unstable, the attorney said, voice smooth. Confused, financially compromised. She made a dramatic claim at a wedding, under stress, then changed her story when consequences arrived. Shelley's fingers tightened around a tissue, but she stayed quiet. The attorney pivoted with a practiced sigh. And Miss Gallant, he continued, turning toward Linnell, is not an innocent bystander. She is a trained professional, an ethics voice, a woman who understood the value of narrative. The court should consider whether this is a manufactured spectacle to protect corporate interests. Linnell listened without blinking. The words were designed to bruise, soft enough to sound reasonable, sharp enough to sting in public. She let them land and pass. Feelings are loud, she reminded herself. Evidence is patient. When her turn came, Linnell stood and walked to the witness box as if she belonged there. She swore to tell the truth, and in that moment her voice stopped being personal. It became precise. I did not sign any consent authorizing the use of genetic material at Marrow & Cohen, she began. The digital consent file contains a signature that is forged. The attorney smiled. Convenient? Linnell didn't react. The timestamp on that signature places it at 2:17 p.m. on the day of my public keynote. I was on stage in front of witnesses, recorded on video, and photographed continuously. I could not have been at that clinic. A murmur rolled through the gallery. The judge raised a hand for silence. Linnell continued, steady as a metronome. The consent packet also shows an attempted scrub of device and access data. That scrub is inconsistent with routine medical intake. It is consistent with concealment. The defense tried to interrupt. The judge allowed it once, then stopped it when the interruptions became a tactic. Linnell laid the story down like bricks. The clinic alias profile for Shelley, the after-hours vault access, the mirrored backup logs preserved under court-approved chain of custody, and the barcode format on the cooler label, an internal format tied to Jeffrey's company protocols. When she spoke of the money trail, she did not dramatize it. She numbered it. Funds moved from a corporate subsidiary to a vendor, then to the clinic's landlord, then into a financial position that profits if the Helix Grove acquisition stalls. This is not an accident. This is a coordinated attempt to create scandal, trigger regulator hesitation, and profit from the delay. The defense tried one last attack, voice rising with frustration. So the court is to believe your fiancé is the victim of everything? A billionaire? Powerless? Linnell's gaze did not waver. Power doesn't prevent crime. Power attracts it. Then Shelley testified. She didn't perform. She didn't plead. She simply told the truth. The debt, the threats, the sealed record used as a leash, the handler's instructions. The phrase that haunted her, deliver the moment, and the non-disclosure that arrived with an embossed watermark. When asked why she spoke at the wedding, Shelley's voice shook only slightly. Because I was scared, she said, and because they told me fear would make the room believe them faster than facts could. The judge listened with an expression carved from stone. When the arguments ended, the ruling came like a door closing. The court ordered Marrow & Co.'s operations frozen pending investigation. The judge authorized a federal probe into illegal implantation practices and evidence tampering, and directed regulators to scrutinize Adrian Vale's financial network and any connected funds positioned to profit from delayed approvals. Shelley was granted protection and structured care. Not as a headline, but as a witness and a mother carrying 3 lives that had become evidence in a war she never asked to join. Outside the courthouse, cameras erupted again. Adrian was led away, still composed, but his eyes flickered once, just once, when he saw that the world hadn't swallowed his story the way he expected. Weeks passed, then months. The big wedding never returned. The spectacle had been contaminated, and Linnell refused to rebuild her joy on top of ashes. She and Jeffrey chose quiet instead. A small room, warm light, a simple officiant, and a handful of people who had proven they could love without consuming. No crowd, no flashing phones, no performance. Just vows and verification. They signed a clear legal framework regarding Shelley's pregnancy, transparent medical oversight, ongoing protection, and a consent-first process that respected truth more than image, with genetic confirmation handled carefully and lawfully. They didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. They refused to let it own them. When Jeffrey took Linnell's hands, his voice was low, steady, and real. "I can't give you a life without storms," he said. "But I will never again mistake control for safety. I choose protection. I choose honesty. I choose you." And Linnell, the woman who once promised herself she would never be controlled again, finally understood the difference between a cage and a covenant. A covenant doesn't trap you. It stands with you.